Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering the Opposition. My name is Lexi Wilson. I'm a licensed master social worker.
And my name is Dr. Nafis Alam, and our topic today will be the power of mindset. Lexi, you and I have been talking about the idea of mind over matter for quite some time now. And today we sort of put it all together in trying to understand how having the right kind of mindset can make for a different life experience altogether.
Yeah, I really like what you said and kind of how you described that. And one thing that I really think is important to point out when we're talking about mindset is the way that we as a society tend to view our bodies and our minds. And we tend to kind of have this belief that our bodies and our minds are very separate, and that, like they're all kind of in the same area, right? But they're, not really related to one another, but actually that's not the case. And a lot of research is coming out actually quite recently about how interconnected the body and mind are, and how important mindset is in negating things like stress or even increasing athletic performance, academic performance. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about this today and kind of dive a little bit deeper.
I mean, there are opposing viewpoints right off the bat. If I think of my years as an athlete or even as in academia, I've always performed better when there was a semblance of nervousness, a little bit of doubt, I suppose. When I was fully confident to the point where I knew, like, I was overconfident, I wouldn't perform up to my standards. So even now when some of my older students are taking their LMSW exams, they're asking me for last minute advice. Sometimes they'll ask me, like, I need you to tell me something to calm me down. My response is usually, I want you to be nervous a little bit, because that nervousness makes you hyper aware. One of the reasons I don't wear a helmet when I ride my one wheel around, and I'll ride on the streets, and I've almost gotten hit by cars several times.
Oh my gosh.
It'll happen. Just,
Not recommended. Do not try this at home.
Don't try that at home or outside. But one of the reasons, and I mentioned this during a faculty meeting the other day, faculty happy hour the other day we had at Boise State University. I mentioned that I ride without a helmet because the level of awareness that I have about my surroundings
increases.
It's highly enhanced when I know subconsciously that I'm in some semblance of danger. Whenever I've had a helmet on, whenever I haven't been nervous for an exam, whenever I've gone into a game that I knew that I was going to win, like, I would just throw a random interception for just like their worst player. And I knew that it was because I lacked focus. So, as we talk about, because obviously with Empowering the Opposition, we always want to talk about different viewpoints. As today we talk about the benefits of addressing stress and addressing nutrition and addressing different categories, there are also arguments to be made to the opposition. Sometimes stress is a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important to, look at this from all perspectives, and to also understand that things like stress, for example, like, as humans, we are built to manage that. And that's something that our ancestors have, for thousands and thousands of years have dealt with in a healthy way. Obviously, stress is important. It's a signal to our bodies and our minds that, hey, something's up. We need to pay a little bit more attention. And so it has a lot of great evolutionary benefits. And so to kind of like start it off today, one video that really, really impacted me, and I actually got to listen to it for the first time. I think it was my freshman year my first year of my master's program, so 2 years ago. And, I'm, just so stressed out and anxious and just putting way too much pressure on myself, which in one hand was great because I had, incredible grades and, I was always on top of my, shit. And, so there was definitely those benefits of the stress that I experienced. However, there were negative benefits, or negative repercussions of that stress as well. And it just so happened that in one of our classes, we watched this TED Talk. I highly recommend people watch it. It's by Kelly McGonigal, and she's a health psychologist, and she talks about mindset and stress. So essentially, she had studied and taught on the importance of stress and how we've for so long been taught that stress makes us sick. It makes us more susceptible to things like the common cold and disrupts our cardiovascular system. And so those have all been links that have been shown to be true. However, what they found recently, she discussed how there was a 8-year longitudinal study of over 30,000 participants. And what they did was they essentially asked these participants about their beliefs of stress. And the ones who had said that they believed, that, they could handle stress, or that, they were able to manage their stress, far outlived and were far less likely to die than the ones who believed that stress was, having a very negative impact on their bodies and their health. So yeah, it was very, significant. So she essentially just kind of talks about how everything that she had been teaching about stress was wrong. It's not that we should avoid stress as humans. That's, we are going to experience it. It's that the way we think about it is way more important than the actual stress that we have in our lives.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that you cannot avoid obstacles, but you can build confidence in overcoming those obstacles. And for those people that believe that stress is going to be so overwhelming to them that they're not going to be able to overcome, then that's exactly what's going to happen, right? So what is it, the old saying, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right?
Yes, that's a great saying.
So that's the thing with stress too, is that that it's going to happen. That, life has its peaks and valleys. And when you're in one of the valleys, are you confident that you're going to overcome, or are you confident that you will be overwhelmed? And she makes a good point in that regard too. And, for a little bit of an analogy, maybe not fully connected, was the idea that, I remember there was a study done on car accidents, and it was found that people who would sort of pass out and just like lose control and just like, lose control.
Oh, they actually fared better because their bodies weren't tense.
Exactly.
I saw that. Yeah.
Right. So stress can cause tension.
Yeah.
And tension leads to greater levels of injury.
Yeah.
So we were taught this in football too, is that when you see someone much bigger than you and they're going to get a good hit on you, don't try to like cushion the blow. Just let yourself get hit.
Wow.
It's gonna lead to fewer injuries if you just let yourself get hit.
That's interesting.
Instead of trying to go against it. And it was counterintuitive at first, but the more you thought about it from a physiological standpoint, we're not yet talking about the psychology of it, but the physiological standpoint, it made perfect sense because your body is naturally able to just move around. But when you're met with something, a stressor, and because of the presence of a stressor, you tense up, that stressor will do damage on you. Even if you're able to withstand your ground, ground, you're still taking the brunt of that force versus where you just let yourself get hit. Let yourself,
Exactly. I mean, it's the difference between having someone run into a brick wall or having someone, kind of run into a feather. Obviously, if you're, going to be more of a feather, then you're going to have a lot less damage on your end.
Yeah.
If you're able to absorb the momentum of the impact. Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting.
So it's always important to understand that stress is going to be there, but it's how you approach stress that determines, whether you're able to cope with it. But then you've got like the opposition saying that, we want as much stress as possible. We don't want strategies to deal with stress. And the reasons for that, it doesn't quite make sense to me, but it may make sense to some people where they might say that stress makes you feel alive. Stress is something that isn't unique to humans, but it is unique to life. So anything that's inanimate does not experience stress, and therefore, maybe we should take pride in it. It also, stress indicates importance. If I am, I don't know, if I'm going out for an interview, how do I know that this interview is a big deal to me? If I'm stressed. If I'm not stressed, I might be thinking to myself, why am I not stressed? Am I doing assessment?
Do I not care?
Yeah, do I not care?
Why? Yeah.
Do I have better options? Like, what's going on here? So stress is also a good indicator of what's important and what's not. It's a negative indicator, but for those who are highly advanced in this understanding, they might actually fall on the opposite side of the argument and say that we want to experience stress because when we experience stress fully and openly and explicitly, we don't have to wonder as to what where our priorities lie.
Yeah.
And I think like one of my friends were talking about, like, I knew that I loved her because I was so nervous talking to her, asking her to marry me or something like that. And I can talk to anybody. And I was like, that's a good way to put it. Because like, most, myself included, like we can generally talk to anyone.
Yeah.
But imagine someone asking another person to be their wife, right? Like, this person, hopefully.
You're stressed and fearful because it matters.
Right, exactly. Not because you don't know them, not because you don't know how you're going to approach it. And usually if you're asking the question, you've already had some semblances of that conversation in the past.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be a surprise, hopefully, if you're doing it the right way.
Yeah, please do not surprise others.
Yeah. So, yet you're still stressed because you understand the levity of the situation. This means on one word will determine the rest of your life. Yes means you have a partner, that particular partner for life. You might be working toward children. You might be working toward grandchildren. You might be, taking vacations together. Whenever someone says the word you, it might no longer mean you individually,
yeah,
but you
it
as
means
a
you
couple.
as a partnership.
So many different things change, which is one of the reasons why I'm so scared of it. That's a different story altogether.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Right, exactly. But then the answer no would mean, like, where do you go from there? Yeah, it could be catastrophic because now you've put yourself out there and you know that you're in a place where your partner is not. And now does the relationship go in the opposite direction where if we're not getting married, then we're not even together then, right? So it's just it's such a pivotal moment. But we only know that it's a pivotal moment because of how stressed we are. If it was just a chill moment for everybody, then they wouldn't be
special.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's one thing I think is so incredible that you brought up too, is that we as a society have really kind of synonymously equated stress with bad or negative, when in reality it is just it's a human experience. It's a feeling that all of us at some point undergo, right? And it's not bad. It's not it's not necessarily good either. It's just a feeling. It's an experience. And so that's just a great way, I think, to just kind of think about some of those things rather than equating any type of feeling, right, to bad or good. It's just there. We experience it.
Yeah.
It's telling us something. What is it telling us? And a lot of times it's not necessarily bad or good. It's, hey, this is important. This matters to me. Or the list could go on and on.
Yeah.
And so kind of like going off that a little bit too, I think this is where we really get into like the mind-body connection of mindset, how we think about problems, how we think about challenges we face, how we think about stress, and how it does impact our bodies and our health. And one thing that I think is really interesting when kind of thinking about this mind-body connection is nutrition. And I don't think this gets talked about enough. And this is one of the most like shocking statistics. I remember hearing this last year and being like, you've got to be kidding me. How is this not talked about? But so essentially the statistic is that 95% of the serotonin that we create in our bodies is created in our gut. And so for those of you who don't know, and I mean, I studied this stuff and I still had to look it up a little bit. But serotonin, it's essentially a chemical that's in our bodies, and it contributes to our happiness and well-being. So it's known as like the happy chemical or the cuddle chemical. So it does a lot of different things, but it really contributes to our well-being. And 95% of that is created in our gut, not our brains, which is so interesting, right? So really what we're putting into our bodies is really affecting our mood a lot more than I think people realize.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's really interesting about how what we put into our bodies contributes to the mind-body connection, and also the mindset. And then kind of like going off that too is like, how do we disrupt mindsets or negative mindsets? How do we change those that may not be, beneficial to us or for us?
Well, I can tell you that like the nutrition, the 95% in your gut, serotonin, that was surprising to me. I just learned that moments before we clicked record. And I've been in this field for a long time. I was very surprised at that. And we had a brief conversation just prior about, people who use food as comfort, right? So many people who use food as comfort might make poor food choices, and as a result, you mentioned that there's a great deal of
depression and anxiety as a result of eating
obesity.
Obesity, and it tends to be very correlated, right? If you're putting a lot of poorly nutritious food into your body, that's not contributing to your serotonin, in your gut and therefore your brain, you're probably going to have some issues with anxiety, with depression, as a result of not, really feeding your body what it needs.
And also, when you are eating bad foods, then you'll get that high because that's where that serotonin is connected.
Exactly. And what's crazy too is that a lot of the foods that are so good, and like obviously I am by no means perfect. Like I love a good, Chick-fil-A every now and again, and like it's easily available. But what's interesting, and that also a lot of people don't know, is that a lot of this food, this fast food, a lot of it is engineered to be highly addicting. They have scientists working on a lot of these different like sauces, especially like also with chips too in general. And these scientists basically try to find the best concoction of like how to get people hooked and give them that immediate like satisfaction of flavor. And I saw this documentary on it with chips and how like Doritos, for example, they're engineered to where when you go and eat one, it gives you this instant burst of like flavor and it goes away very quickly. So you're like, oh, I need more. Yeah. And so before you know it, you've downed a whole bag of Doritos and, no nutrition there. And they're engineered to be addicting.
I've also heard, and this might be completely false, but this just came across my mind. I heard someone say that the reason why chips make this amount of sound that they do, they can be just as crunchy but not as noisy. Oh. But the reason why they are so noisy is because auditorily you connect the taste, the instant gratification of that
with
taste,
the noise.
With the sound.
We're classically conditioning.
Right, exactly. So when you don't necessarily crave the taste, you're still craving the sound because the sound is comforting of like, I can't recreate it on the mic, but it's like, it's a comforting sound because it reminds you of a time when you're relaxing and watching the game or something like that. So essentially you're addicted to having chips if you're hungry and also if you need to feel like you just need
There's that emotional component too. I think a great example of this is I'm not really a soda drinker. I used to drink it every now and again, and then I realized, okay, this is like total trash. Why am I putting this in my body? But what's really interesting is my grandma, she would always have Pepsis in the house. And I will never buy a Pepsi on my own. I never buy them at the store, and I will never order them at a restaurant. But anytime I go to her house, I'll open a Pepsi and I'll have one. And it's always because I equate Pepsi with a feeling of like, oh, I'm with, my grandparents.
It's nostalgia.
My grandma and grandpa, and like I equate that taste. It's so weird. But yeah, it's very interesting how we associate food, not just with...
Yeah, it's sort of like...
so weird.
If you were to go to your favorite restaurant that you've eaten at before and get a to-go bag and bring it home, it's not going to taste as good.
No, it doesn't though.
I know.
It doesn't.
I know. That's the thing. That's how you know that your mind is playing tricks on you, because your mind is telling you, Lexi, you're out, you're enjoying yourself, you're surrounded by good friends. We're going to make this food taste much better than it actually does.
Yes.
We're going to hook you up. But then when you bring it back home, like, oh, this steak was amazing. Or you bring it home, it's like, what, is this the same thing that we had there? And it's just, there's such a huge connection. And it makes sense now. Like, I don't know why I didn't put the two together, but 95% is a huge number.
I know. And I think it's so important, and we need to educate people on this. But the problem is, people don't realize that it's not like one day, someone created a burger joint and like McDonald's just happens to be an incredible billion-dollar business. No, they have like scientists who are working on creating.
Right.
Yes, they have mixed science, creating these highly addictive, foods, which I wouldn't even call them foods, but highly addictive substances and whatever it is, like. And we all enjoy these every now and again. Like, it's just a normal thing, right? The problem is when we think about, what we're putting into our bodies and how it's affecting our mood. And I don't know about you, but like, I tend to eat very healthy throughout the week. And that wasn't always the case. I used to eat like total trash during grad school because I was more, I kind of use food as like, oh, like I'm going to enjoy this. Like, I'm stressed out with school, blah, blah, blah. Well, in the past, like 9 to 10 months, I'm like, no, I'm going to like really fuel my body and eat what's good. And I've noticed as I eat, really healthy meals throughout the week, and on the weekends, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'll go and just kind of eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
And I notice a huge difference. Like, after I go out with friends, and I'll just have like whatever meal I want, and I just feel so different. Like, I can tell my mood is different, and I'm not as energized, and it's just those little things we don't really pay attention to. But if you are paying attention to it, I suggest you do, because it has a huge impact on the way we think, the way we feel, our moods. Yeah.
Well, in a vacuum, we would say that we'd like people to make better nutritional choices, but nutrition isn't always at the top of people's lists.
Or accessible. For some people it isn't.
So if someone is dealing with high degrees of depression and maybe even suicidal ideations, and the only thing getting them off their mind off of these dark thoughts is what is a double cheeseburger? Is that a thing from McDonald's?
A McDouble.
A McDouble.
Yeah.
Everything's a Mc. Okay. So
don't forget it.
My apologies. So a McDouble is the only thing that's keeping your mind off of the reality of life, of that particular person's life. In empowering the opposition, we should consider the point of view that maybe healthy food choices don't fall at the top of the hierarchy of needs when it comes to this, right?
Yeah.
Maybe unhealthy food choices may be what is most healthy for you at the time.
At the moment.
And let's make sense of it, right? So obviously, an unhealthy food choice isn't best for you. But at that moment, if you just broke up with someone, you're having financial troubles, you're
down a couple Ben and Jerry's. We've all been there.
Yeah, exactly. What is that? Ice cream?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. The ladies will know what I'm talking about.
Okay. I was like, who are these people?
Who's Ben and Jerry?
Yeah.
And why are you downing?
I'm legit had no idea. But yeah, I mean, ice cream certainly helps, and it's not good for you. But in that moment, it just helps you calm down.
Yeah.
And bad food can have good
Positive effects in the very short term.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that short term
Very short.
might be very significant.
Yeah.
Because if that short term is the decision between hurting yourself and not hurting yourself, yes, it's a short term decision. But if you do choose to hurt yourself, that's a long-term decision,
long-term,
even though that decision was made in the short term.
Yeah.
So we can't discount the idea. This is why, like,
there is that benefit, and I think it's important that you recognize that, because if it wasn't of benefit to people in some way, we wouldn't be doing it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And it's cheaper. It's more accessible. There's
available.
Yeah. There's a sense of just, enjoyment. And for some, who no judgment passed, for some, that might be the only enjoyment they get in that day. Who are we to take that away from them?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I really, really think it's, important to consider all those different aspects of that. Now, also kind of thinking about, our mindset, right? We talked a little bit about nutrition, and then, our mindset on stress. I'd like to talk a little bit about ways that we can disrupt our mindset and how we can work to create a more positive mindset that is beneficial to both our minds and our bodies. And so, do you have any ideas or ways that we can do that?
Well, I think it always takes about 3 to 4 months to create a habit, and bad habits are hard to break, but so too are good habits. So that's the benefit of having a good mindset habit, is that if you're always waking up and having positive thoughts, then after a few months, that's going to be your homeostasis, if we're using social work language and biological language. So building those kinds of habits, but building those habits are going to take a long time, right? It's going to take a lot of effort because it's unnatural to you.
Yeah.
And also just, part of it is just reminding yourself that no matter what the troubles are that you have, there is always someone who has it worse. And we tend often not to think about the people that have it worse than us. We always tend to think of the people that have it better than us. Why can't I be like him? Why can't I be as big and strong and powerful and rich and attractive and successful as this other person? Yet while you're trying to be someone else, you forget that there's a larger majority of people that are wishing that they could be you.
Yeah. And I think that is a good point, but also in the opposition to that too, I think a lot of times when people, are experiencing those really difficult seasons in their life, whether it be anxiety, depression, SI, whatever it is, just telling someone, someone has it worse, isn't necessarily... It doesn't change how someone's feeling in that moment. It doesn't obviously validate. It doesn't validate where they're at.
It does the opposite.
And it does the opposite. It anti-validates. Yeah. And so I think it's important that, yes, we understand that there's a lot of people who are way better off than myself, for example, and there's a lot of people who have it far worse than I. But all I can control, or anyone can control, is within your own realm of control. So your mindset, the people you have around you, to some extent, the type of nutrition you put in your body. There's small things that us as individuals can control, and I think are important to focus on.
I think it's important also to keep a mental journal. I think, 2020, no one's keeping an actual journal where they write stuff. I mean, people don't even text me full, complete sentences anymore, so I can't imagine journals being in diaries. Right, exactly.
Journaling.
But if you can take a mental journal and just earmark everything that you did yesterday that was an improvement from the day prior. And just start today with that, saying that yesterday was an improvement on the day prior. And today, maybe it'll be an improvement, maybe it won't be. But I know for a fact that I'm capable of having better days than days prior.
Yeah.
And in some instances, if you're really learning something that you can see yourself learning over the course of time, you can sort of celebrate those little tiny successes. Like, yesterday I couldn't do this math equation, and now I'm using it as a part of an even larger equation, as part of a larger formula. That's something that you can acknowledge. But it's one of those things where balance is key.
Yeah.
Because you can also get to a point where you're just so
never
overconfident.
do anything wrong. Yeah.
Right. And you're so overconfident and cocky, and then that's not a good thing either. So.
Yeah. You want to be able to have that balance. And I think too, whether it's a real journal or a mental journal or whatever it is, I think what can be useful for a lot of people is thinking about those short, attainable goals, right? I think a lot of us that can be overly ambitious in some of our goals, right? When in reality, it's just like, no, we can just, really strive to set attainable, manageable goals that I should absolutely be able to achieve within the next day or week. Not something that I'm going to have to really push super hard for, but because the key to a lot of these long-term changes and habit forming is that, you're creating these small incremental changes over time that eventually turn into large changes. And those kind of changes are far more sustainable than, I'm going to lose 10 pounds in 4 days or whatever,
Yeah. So I gave I guess a seminar, you'd call it, on this exact thing that we're talking about. And we talked about the differences between goals and tasks. So if you have an iPhone or an Android, whatever you have, you essentially create a reminder list. And on the reminder list, the title of the reminder list is the goal that you want to achieve. Let's say the goal is, you want to lose 20 pounds or something like that. And you're not going to be able to do that in 2 days, obviously, right? But that's a goal.
Yeah.
And then underneath it, you're going to write down all of the tasks that are going to get you to that goal, that are incremental, that are day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour. And one of the more important things that I mentioned, and I forget what article it came from, it was evidence-based practice, was that once you accomplish a task, obviously when you accomplish a goal, it's done. It's, you've lost the 20 pounds, you can celebrate, and you'll never forget that you lost the 20 pounds. In fact, you'll probably tell everybody and they're going to get tired of you. But the incremental tasks, when you complete them, do not delete them. Okay, you can hit the check mark and hide them, but don't delete them, because if you delete the tasks and then you look back, it's as though today is the first day that you've been working on losing 20 pounds. Meanwhile, you've been doing these incremental tasks for over a month and a half now, let's say hypothetically. You need to be able to go back and look in that rearview mirror and see what you've already done to encourage yourself moving forward. Yeah,
that's such a good piece of advice. And I actually do this very thing when it comes to my career tasks. So I have this like little, it's like a loose leaf weekly kind of agenda thing. And so it has like a little spot for like every weekday. And every single day as I'm working, I write down all the tasks I have for the day, and I have a little check box like right next to it, and every time I complete one of those tasks, I highlight it, check it off, and I keep all of them.
Good.
So it's really kind of cool because I can look throughout the weeks how many little teeny things I've completed, and it's such a wonderful feeling of like accomplishment and like moving forward, and you're moving closer to this goal, whether that be in your career life or as a student or even like your personal goals, whatever those look like. And we feel more satisfied when we see our progress that way. So.
We do, but if we're going to empower the opposition too, right? Let's talk about why disrupting a negative mindset might not always be the best thing. Maybe a negative mindset has you like Taylor Swift or Adele, where
that's true. It's a big money maker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, that negative mindset of just breakups and getting dumped and, that's where you get your inspiration. I think this is more of a joke than anything else, but I think someone at one point said that when Adele's in a solid relationship, she's not making good music. And the same thing with Taylor Swift is there's no one to break up with. So a negative mindset, is it Billie Eilish too? I'm not very familiar with
Oh yeah,
her,
I
but
love Billie Eilish, but she tends. I mean, she has some breakup songs, but a
Yeah.
lot of them tend to be about like her mental health and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. So, well, if she didn't have any mental health concerns, then there
Yeah.
would be nothing to sing about.
Absolutely, and,
Right,
and
so-
we were talking about Kanye West earlier.
Right,
about
exactly.
There's no way he would be the creative genius he is unless
Yeah.
he probably did struggle with some of this mental health.
So there's something to be said that if you were to address what appears to be a negative mindset, you might also be eliminating the positive results from that negative mindset.
Yeah.
So sometimes, it's funny because I was just speaking to my class about this a few hours ago, that like you always, social workers tend to be agents of change. We want to change this, we want to change that. Yet we don't always think to ourselves and ask ourselves, is change what's best right now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we get so enamored with changing things that we don't consider whether or not that change would actually be for the better, or if it's just
Or
change
if the
for
status
the sake of
quo
change.
is good as it is.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. I really like that. And it really does make me think too of like it's sort of like in Nafisa and I at some point both had to take the DSM class. So it's the class where we learn about all the mental disorders. And one thing we're taught in that class is that, you don't ever diagnose somebody with a mental disorder unless they have problems that, bring them into therapy, and that's why they're there, right? You're not just going to diagnose some random person on the street.
Yeah.
They have to have issues, as far as like, whether that be their social life
Function,
or
right, yeah.
social functioning. And so I think it is very interesting because a lot of the best artists, if they didn't struggle with, some of the mental health concerns that they have, they would not be who they are today.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have the art that we have today. I mean, really, you think about it, some of the best art, some of the most incredible inventors.
Yeah.
That we were talking about
Tesla?
today. Yes. Some of the most incredible inventors, artists, they had serious mental health concerns.
Tesla and his penguin. Penguin.
Pigeon. Yeah. So just recently, I was learning a little bit about Nikolai Tesla, and how he was an incredible inventor, mastermind of his time, but also he definitely had some very interesting deficits in his social functioning. So he was never married, but he professed that he had fallen in love with a white pigeon the way a man falls in love with a woman. So it's just very interesting, but
It's one hell of a bird.
yeah, and then like Van Gogh, right? He chopped off his
ears
ear.
off, yeah.
Like there's this very fine line of like, hey, yeah, people do struggle with some things, right? But then there's also this trade-off of
Right.
like remarkable genius and gifts that you have to give to the world, right? No one should ever be cast out as entirely this or that, right? Everyone has something to, contribute and give to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, just kind of the last thing I wanted to mention was, okay, so today, obviously, we learned that, there is research that is showing that our mindset is incredibly powerful, not only for our bodies, but also our minds. And nutrition is obviously very important. But how do we disrupt some of these, negative mindsets? And we talked a little bit about that, but I also think there's some other things that, I want to leave with others today. And, and there's a lot of ways that you can, kind of disrupt these negative mindsets. Obviously, if there's things that you want to change. And when you're really thinking with a mind-body perspective, therapy is obviously always, an option. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, works to, kind of rewire brain circuits and functioning, and there's a huge evidence base for that. And then you also have meditation that is really shown to help, improve mind-body functioning. You also have yoga. And there's just a lot of different ways you can do that. Self-reflection.
You know, it can be something that's very personalized, right? Like
Yeah.
you can even achieve this by going and working out at the gym. You can take a ride on your mountain bike and just, you know, enjoy nature. You really, it's important to, self-awareness is the most important kind of awareness, right? To understand what you respond to best.
Yeah.
And just to try as many different things as possible and to figure out what is best and what's right for you.
Yeah. And what works for one person is not going to work for the other. And that's perfectly okay. I think it's just, you know, our responsibility of ourselves to kind of try to figure out, okay, hey, what does work? What doesn't? You know, what matters to me in this moment? What doesn't? And, you know, and to just be okay with, you know, where you're at right now and to move forward. Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'm Dr. Nafis Alam.
And I'm Lexi Wilson. I'm a licensed master social worker. This has been Empowering the Opposition. See you next time.